Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back. I'm here today with Rae Diamond, who is a mentor, teacher, and artist working with the creative intelligence of nature through Qigong, meditation, energy medicine, and creative work. Their book, The Cantigee Oracle, accompanies an oracle deck painted by Laura Zuspan. Thank you so much for being here, Rae.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about you and about what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm a Qigong teacher, and for anyone who's unfamiliar, Qigong is it's a form of moving meditation. You can also be still, and there's often visualizations and work with the breath, and it's an aspect of Chinese medicine. And
Very
I'm
cool.
an artist of many kinds.
I love that. It's never just one kind.
No, no.
Awesome. Well, before we get into our conversation today, I like to ask everyone this question, and I would love to hear your answer. So the question is, how do you think witchcraft can be a form of self-care and help you to live your most magical life?
That's an excellent question. So witchcraft, I don't really engage in what I do. I don't call it witchcraft, but I think it's certainly, Qigong it evolved out of shamanic dances. And I think shamanism and witchcraft are basically, they're the same thing with different names. And so anything you do where, witchcraft comes from nature. It's this way of connecting with nature, with the natural world and the natural world within you. And by bringing those things in alignment, noticing what's happening in both of those spaces and bringing them into clearer alignment, that I can't think of a better form of self-care, because then you're responding to what's within you, you're working with what's around you, or you're connecting with nature, and nature is always changing, so it keeps you connected to change, and it enables you to change with nature. So I think that's your answer for today from me.
Yeah, that's a killer answer. I love it. Yeah. And I think that leads so nicely into everything we want to talk about today too. I love that you're bringing in this connection to nature in a different way than we usually talk about on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about your book and the Oracle deck and kind of where that came from, how it's connected to that conversation.
Yeah. So the Cantigee began as this, we didn't even plan for it to be about nature initially. It was initially based on these fantastical writings that I wrote before we started collaborating. And so it was initially this very fantastical deck, and I was just writing away and Laura was painting, and we were mostly working off of ideas from those stories, and she brought in a few ideas and I kept bringing in more. And before we got very deep into it, I was like, can we make this ecological? Because everything that I'm interested in and all of the archetypes that we're working with here they're all inspired by nature, and I want to give back. And so that's basically how it began way back in 2018. And it just continued and snowballed and became bigger and bigger. And I think we both got really tired and kept going until it was done.
Yes, I know something about that. Oh my gosh. So did the fantastical elements kind of remain for you, or did it completely evolve away from that?
Oh, those stayed present. It's a very fantastical project. And yeah, there's each of the archetypes has not only a card and Laura's artwork for it is very fantastical, and it's like whimsical and also a little sometimes grotesque, and she really plays that edge of like beautiful and like terrifying. And sometimes it leans more one way or sometimes more the other, but I find her, it's just like you get these nice surprises by looking at her imagery, and they're very story-like in how they convey. And then And then each of the archetypes also has, I wrote a little fairy tale, and some of them are just like a couple sentences long, but some of them are like a page long. And so it varies, but there's a fairy tale for each of the archetypes. So there's lots of story woven in, because story is, it's what speaks to very deep parts of us, and it can create these ahas in places that are beyond where we're usually looking, and those ahas like trigger these ahas in our life. So yeah, so the fantastical element is all the way woven through. Yeah.
I love that. Well, first of all, I love the connection to fairy tale. I wrote my undergraduate thesis on fairy tale illustration. So it's very, very close to me. And I think that fairy tales are such a powerful way to connect with that kind of inner magic and, recapture something either from childhood or that's ancient or both. Like, I think there's so much power there. Through any kind of storytelling, and my chosen was always fairy tales. So I love that connection there. I also love what you were saying about the way that, and I think you described really just beautifully how oracle decks work, is when we pull a card, it triggers something both through the story of the card and also our own experience. Like, I'm such a fan of oracle decks for that reason, that I feel they're so much about co-creation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a big, that's one of the big ideas behind Cantigee is stimulating creativity. Because when we're creative, we're innovative, and when we're innovative, we're doing things in a new way. And that is of benefit to us and to others, but it's also how we learn. Like, we sometimes, plenty of times I've done things in a new way and I have failed miserably. But failure is also a wonderful teacher. And other times I've done things in a new way and it's been a huge breakthrough. But either way, being creative and trying new things is the only way to create change. Like, if you do the same thing all the time, you're just going to end up with the same results.
Right. How do you feel that connects to the way that nature shifts and evolves?
Well, nature's constantly creating. Like, that is what it does. Like, the plants, they're manufacturing themselves out of sunlight and water and like minerals from the soil. They're amazing. And then all the animals ultimately feed on the plants, right? And so whether you eat plants or you eat animals, somewhere down the line, there was a plant before all of that. And then just, just think about like volcanoes, like they're like vomiting up like molten earth, and then it hardens, once it comes up, and it becomes new earth. So everything is always like, even things that we think of as inanimate are in a process of creation. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And of course, so are we.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Definitely. So how do you feel that your work and the deck and any kind of practice with nature, how do you feel that can be healing for people?
Well, I think it really depends on how you engage with it. And absolutely the first step is having that intention, right? So for someone to experience healing, first they need to have that intention. And then I think another thing that is really helpful, I guess I'm like kind of answering a question that exists before your question. But I will come back to your question, I promise. But even to think of the word healing, the root of this word is the same root as the word whole. So to heal is to be in your wholeness. And this is a big reason that I love that the cards in this deck are circular, because the circle is about the wholeness of self, the wholeness of this earth, and that we're a part of this earth. Like, we don't need to heal the earth, we're a part of it. So if the earth needs healing, we need healing, right? So to work with this deck for personal healing is is to first come with that intention of, I have an inquiry, not just because I'm anxious and I want to know something, but because I need some healing. Like I'm anxious because I'm not connected to my wholeness. That's ultimately at the bottom of it. And so I'm going to pull a card, or I'm going to open the book at random, or however I'm going to engage to, in order to reconnect with my wholeness. And so that, I think, and you can do that whether you do that with the Cantigee Oracle, or drinking some tea, or going on a walk in nature, whatever it is, in talking to your therapist, whatever you're doing, if you do it with that intention of returning to your wholeness, then I think it can't help but take you there. Maybe.
Yeah, I have a number of, right. Yeah, no, I have a number of circular decks, and I think you're so right. There's something really beautiful about it being in kind of whatever position it is, and that they're all part of the card. Because I don't typically read traditional reversals in a traditional, rectangular deck in my own practice. And I appreciate the way that a circular deck kind of asks you to think a little bit differently. It's not upright or not, it's wherever it is,
Exactly. Yeah. And someone pointed out in another interview, this interviewer said, yeah, sometimes I'll I'll flip the card over and I'll see, because it's not upright, I'll see different kind of imagery, things that Laura couldn't have seen because she was looking at it, straight up and down while she was making it. So the art, because it's on the circular format, it can suggest all kinds of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you talk as well about how we can be a healing force for nature, not just that it's something we receive from. Can you speak a little more to that?
Yes, this goes back to this, I'm a very idealistic person. And so I like to think of, like, how can we, how can everything be symbiotic? And how can we have a relationship with nature that is like a self-perpetuating fountain, where we're receiving this, everything we have ultimately comes from nature. I mean, even if you're wearing 100% like rayon clothes, like ultimately that still somewhere down the line came from nature, or vinyl, whatever you like. But anyhow, so everything we have ultimately comes from nature. And so then it's like, well, what can we give back, right? Because you think about, like, oh, if a community is built around a well and everyone's just drawing from the well, and they never make sure that it gets replenished, it's not going to go so well for the community.
Right.
People might start stealing water from each other. And, it's like, this is how, like, it's that when we don't take care of what's there, then we start getting nervous, and that can lead to greed that we can justify for all kinds of reasons. And it's not inhumane. It's just like, we're animals on a certain level. There's more to us than that, but also there is that to us.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing to remember. And I think so much of magic or witchcraft, or whatever words we use to describe what we do, right, is recognizing that, that we have so much power within us, and also we're not any better than, any other creature on the planet, that, and having that balance, that we're both very, very powerful, and also, just here to move through the world and have these experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were talking earlier about how your Qigong practice is about both movement and stillness. I've been to a few classes, but I, am by no means an expert. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And I actually love this question so much, because it's very poetic. The answer is that when in Qigong, when you're moving, part of your awareness is trained on what's still. And when you're still in Qigong, part of your awareness is trained on what's moving, right? So for example, let's say I engage in a moving practice. I'm trying to keep my mind really quiet and still the whole time, so that I can observe what's happening and and flow with it as best I can, and let my body be in the flow of the chi, right? Which is, like it's not only energy, but it's intelligent. Chi has intelligence, and I like to think of chi as it is a manifestation of the intelligence and vitality of nature, and of just the way the world is, the world beyond just the earth. So anyways, then finish the practice, and there's a moment of stillness, and that's called holding the chi. And the thing to do in that moment is to observe how much is moving internally, because all of that movement was to vitalize the chi within, right, and around you as well. And then you get to observe it, and it's doing really interesting, lovely things at that point. And you can feel all this like aliveness, like some people feel tingling, or like different temperatures. There's all kinds of ways that it can manifest, or movement, currents that you can feel in the body. Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. How do you feel that your practice has informed the deck as well?
Oh, immensely. I was in like very intensive periods of training the whole time I was writing, and I still am. Like that's just what I do. So it's very in there. But so chi has its own physics, right? So you think about the physics of matter, like things are drawn towards the earth, so they're going to fall towards the earth if there isn't another force acting on them. And they don't really rise very easily, unless it's smoke or steam. And that's because of heat, right? And a change of like the warmer things are going to rise. But chi physics is a little different. There is so when you're working with chi, and let's say you're moving your arms and you're working with chi, and in that process, they're actually going to lift easier than they're going to come down. So chi physics is a little opposite, because when we're lifting, we're using the earth chi, which rises pretty quickly. It has like a sort of like a geyser, or just things like that or like trees, just things that has that rising kind of thrusting feeling. But heaven's chi, that descends more slowly. And so when you're doing descending movements, you're kind of letting heaven's chi come in. And that's the creative energy that brings the change. The earth energy brings the manifestation.
That's so interesting. I love that perspective. And I feel like it kind of comes back to what we were saying about stillness, that like some of the most sacred moments are the still moments, like, and or not necessarily still, but the slower movements, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I don't think I actually answered your question. I got really geeked out. So in terms of how all of this informs Cantigee, I mean, that actually the question about movement and stillness is a big part, because half of Cantigee is about coming into a slower way of being. Half of Cantigee is about like building, and this is about the play of yin and yang, right? Which is at one of the core things that we work with in Qigong is yang is the active, moving kind of energy, and yin is the more still, receptive. And the thing is that they are always interacting and becoming each other, right? As the yang builds, it hits a point of apex, and from that point it turns into yin. And same thing with the yin, it builds and builds, becomes more and more yin until it turns into yang. And so the whole cycle, so Cantigee has 52 cards, and you can use it as one card per week for a year. And it follows that cycle through the whole year, which begins at winter solstice, which is, the most yin moment, when there's more night, more darkness, more rest, hopefully. And apex is at summer solstice, when there's like the longest day and the the most light, and everything is the most alive, right? And so,
Right.
so there's this whole thing of shifting between yin and yang. And another core idea here is that if we look at what's happening in nature and in our personal lives, in societies, countries, cultures, countercultures, everywhere on the planet right now, there's what's called yin deficiency. There's not enough rest. And we see that in nature by the polar caps melting. Glaciers are cold and still. They are, and they're very yin, and they're melting, which is a yang process. And they're melting because of all the fossil fuels we're burning, because we're moving so fast and we don't rest enough. Right. And so that's so these are just some of the ideas in terms of how it's percolated into Cantigee. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I talk a lot about the seasons, and I've always thought it was so fascinating how at the winter solstice, we celebrate the longest night of the year. And summer solstice, we celebrate the longest day. But from that point forward, they shift, right? The day after the winter solstice day is a little bit longer than it was. And it's so interesting because we often think of them as the beginning of their season, the beginning of summer, the beginning of winter, but in many ways they're the end. It's not how we experience it with the weather, but from the Earth's perspective, it's sort of like, okay, we've come to the bottom of the hill, and now it's time to very slowly start growing again. I always just thought that was so fascinating and so kind of contrary to the black and white way we tend to think about it. It's so much more nuanced than we give it credit for.
Yes, and actually in Chinese medicine, they're not considered the beginning of the season, they're considered the middle.
Well, and it's so interesting how that has been so lost. I mean, we talk about it a lot in various different alternative spiritualities, but it's been so lost. Our calendar, my friend and I were just talking about this the other day, that our calendar says, the winter solstice is the first day of winter and the summer solstice is the first day of summer, but our ancestors called them midwinter and midsummer. It's so fascinating how that shift has happened, and how it's starting to be reclaimed. We're starting to question, does that actually make sense?
Yes, thank goodness. Progress is happening.
Well, can you speak a little bit as well to kind of your creative process and the creative practice of any of the practices we've talked about, but especially of the book?
Yeah, sure. So the book, okay, so in the spring of 2018, I began a huge amount of writing, and it was more literary, like experimental work, and a lot of hybrids, they're sort of like poems and sort of like stories. That's why they're hybrids, right? So and they were very fairy tale like as well, and very dream-like, and they were super zany. And I just, like, Laura and I were friends, and I just thought that she would get a kick out of them. So I read one to her. I think it was Potion to Purge All Poisons was the title of that one. And it was, I think it was the zaniest at that time to date. And she, like, at the time, I didn't know this, but she had a very profound experience. I just thought she was like enjoying it a lot. But apparently it was much deeper than from what I could see, and she didn't tell me until much later. And so then, because she enjoyed it so much, later on I asked her if she'd want to illustrate some, and she said, well, can we make an oracle deck instead? And so I was like, okay. And so of course she was going to do the art, and I was going to write. And so what I did is I extrapolated archetypes from all these different stories that I had already written. So basically I had already been working on Cantigee for 6 months without knowing it. And so quite a number of them, like well over 20, but I think we ended up using 16 of them. And so so about a third of Cantigee, a third of the archetypes is from that. And so, I just gave her this list, and she started painting, I started writing, and it seemed to me that she was really inspired by those, and was focusing more on those than bringing forth her own ideas. And that I really wanted her to have to bring in more, but it's just not how it went, and so it really became more about these, like, the style of the archetypes really came from that process. And then that kind of, like, it sort of crystallized it, and then we were sort of locked into it and needed to stick with that. So that I don't know, I mean, like, we met, I think for the first year we worked a little bit less consistently together on it, but after the first year, we, like, both committed, and then we started meeting, like, every week, whether in person or on the phone. And I presented a lot of ideas, and did just writing, and I mostly waited to write the stories until after she had painted, so that she would have more freedom of what imagery to choose. And then so most of it was that I would come up with an idea, she would paint from that, like an idea for an archetype and some ideas of imagery for her to just kind of, like, start off with, and she would then come up with an image. And then meanwhile, I would be working on all the kind of more technical writing of, like, what's the symbolism and what's the guidance for this. And there's also, for each archetype, there's a creative prompt for artists or anyone who wants to do creative work. There's practices you can do, spiritual practices that help you embody the archetype. There's what I call portals, which are these questions that take you into the way of seeing through the lens of this archetype. There's ways to use it as an icon. So you can have the card up and just kind of have it as this reminder of something that you're working on, like, for however long you want and or need. And then there's also an environmental connection for each archetype. And so I was working on all that stuff. And once she gave me an image, then I would write a story. Occasionally I would write a story first.
Very cool. That's such a fun process. I love the kind of back and forth. That's a lot of how I write a lot of things as well. It's sort of like, okay, I'm going to work on this piece, and then we're going to work on this piece, and it kind of informs each other. I know this is probably an impossible question, but do you have a favorite card or a favorite couple of cards?
I do. I like different ones for different reasons. Probably most of the time when I try to think of what one do I like the most, it's probably Your Heart in Sync with Cricket Song. Because that one is about resonance. And I think that's such a beautiful guide in life. And it's about the way that you find resonance is by really getting deeply into whatever it is that you're into. Just letting yourself surrender in a very primal way, like whether it's your breath and your steps, and you're just really enjoying your walk, and you're just really feeling the rhythm of your own body, the various rhythms of your own body, your heartbeat, the rhythm of your breath, the rhythm of your footsteps, and seeing how that interrelates with the way the trees are, like, moving and waving around, because nothing in nature is ever totally still. And and you just come so into the moment that you're in resonance. Yeah. But I think that also happens in these more macro ways of, like, how do you really find the love of your life? By being tuned into what you love, right? And then eventually it takes you to someone, who loves that too, and you can love it together. Or the career of your dreams. It's just like all of these things is to come into the resonance of, like, your own resonance and finding it in the world. But first you have to find it in yourself, right? So
Right.
it's really, it's a card, that one is the card of the heart. And so even though the numbers start, number one card is the dark solstice sun, and it starts at winter solstice, and it's that that nadir point of the year. To me, that deck starts with your heart in sync with Cricket Song. You start with the heart.
That's so beautiful. I love it. Well, this has been so great. I know everyone's going to definitely want to get the deck, which is so beautiful. Can you tell people where they can find you and where they can find the deck?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the deck is published by North Atlantic Books, which is a really wonderful nonprofit publisher. They do everything right, in my opinion. They're really above the boards. And it's distributed through Penguin Random House. So you can go into any bookstore that you want, and they will have an account with Penguin Random House. And so if they're not carrying Cantigee already, you can ask them to special order it for you. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Noble, like IndieBound. It's all over the place. Not hard to find. To find me online, I have two websites. So for my more art stuff, it's raediamond.com. And for my more teaching, healing stuff, it's rae13diamond.com. And Laura, you can find at theluminousvoid.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll link those below. And yeah, I did see it at my local bookstore the other day. So it's always fun.
Yay.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. And thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
All right. Thanks very much, Janae.